Hi everyone, I'm back. As you know, I'm Dr. Jen, pronouns she, hers, hers, and I share with people what we can learn from animals to help improve our lives. I've been wanting to make a video about transgender identity for a while, but I felt ill-equipped to talk about the human side of this because I identify as cis female. That means that I identify with the biological gender assigned at birth, female. But that isn't true for everyone, including a close friend and colleague of mine. We decided to make this video to provide some much needed information about what transgender is, why contemporary society's attachment to the biological binary, or the two boxes, male or female, isn't in keeping with, well, biology, and what we know about gender identity in humans and other animals. We are also providing links to articles and resources that were used to make this video, so please be sure to check that out for more information.
Hi everyone, I'm Veronica, or Red, depending on the day. My pronouns are they, them, theirs, and I'm non-binary. I met Dr. Jen when I was working on my PhD in biomathematics. I recently came out as non-binary, which is part of the trans identity. I felt for a long while that my gender wasn't quite right, it was just a little bit off. Being trans, or not identifying with the gender you were assigned at birth, comes with all sorts of myths, stereotypes, and stresses. When I came out, I had people tell me that my gender identity was imaginary because, quote unquote, there are only two biological sexes. This message came from people I knew to have backgrounds in science, which confused me because they weren't overly religious. I know from my limited research that other animals do not follow this gender binary, and when I mentioned this to Dr. Jen, we decided to do this video.
The first thing we want to address is the idea that biological gender is binary, either male or female. This couldn't be further from the truth given what we know about biology. The reality is that biological gender identity is fluid and flexible to different degrees in different individuals within and across species. That means for humans and other animals, there are more than two boxes. Consider the cardinal. What you might recognize as male is the bright red one, and what you might recognize as female is the tan or brown one. But what of this one? Or this one? Is it male? Is it female? Or is it both? This is a biologically non-binary individual. That means that it doesn't fit in one or other box that we're conditioned to believe exist. Biological genders that are outside of the two boxes that we're so familiar with and attached to occur in butterflies, crustaceans, cardinals, and a whole host of other birds, as well as a suite of different species. For all you bird fanatics, we're going to keep on the bird theme and take a look at this beautiful sun angel hummingbird. This bird is found from Venezuela through Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, all the way to Bolivia. If you thought there were only two genders and that they were discrete, meaning either male or female, then you would expect only males to have this particular coloration that's around the neck, like a bib of feathers, and it's called a gorget. What has been discovered for this species and 17 other species of hummingbirds is biological transgender expression. This simply means that some percentage of males have coloration that's characteristic of females, and some percentage of females have coloration, these gorget feathers, that are typically only found in males. Now you might be thinking, so what? That's hummingbirds, not people. Well, first of all, it's not just hummingbirds and cardinals. These are simply two examples of non-binary gender expression in other animals. The point is that we see this in a lot of species. We also see it in humans. For as long as anatomically modern humans, that's us, have been on this planet, which is approximately 200,000 years, There have been cultures all over the globe that have words, rituals, and cultural acknowledgement that accommodates the very real biological fact that gender isn't binary. It's not this or that. It's only relatively recently in contemporary society, let's say 300 to 400 years, maybe 500 years, that we've become attached to this two-box system. And it doesn't work for hummingbirds, and it doesn't work for people.
And gender identity isn't fixed either. If you remember, in the first Jurassic Park, they biologically made it so that all of the dinosaurs in the park were female by denying them a specific hormone during their development. But because they had used DNA of frogs to combine with the dinosaur DNA, the dinosaurs were able to change sexes within a same-sex environment. And while this is a work of fiction, this is based on real biological organisms that can do this. So gender isn't fixed either.
We might all be familiar with clownfish, Finding Nemo, and other reef fishes that are notorious for switching their gender at some point in their lives. But the frog that Veronica mentioned is much less well known. It's called the common reed frog. Now, for a long time, it was thought that this gender switching in the common reed frog was pretty rare because it was only observed in a captive situation. But we now know that it's not as unusual as we thought. How common? On average, about 5 to 10% of the population had changes in gender identity expression, meaning they were genetically XX but looked like males, or they were genetically XY, meaning male, but looked like females. In one pond, it was actually as high as 44% of the individuals showed some degree of gender reversal. You may get squeamish about eels, but this is truly one spectacular example that helps us see the fluid and flexible nature of gender identity expression. Like some human cultures that build in a time of agenderedness, so lacking in gender identity for individuals until they mature, at which time they tell the community, this is my gender identity, the American eel spends some portion of its time during its life without a gender. As juveniles, they're in this agendered stage, so they haven't matured. And in this stage, they're called glass eels. As they grow into, let's say, teenagers, they change appearance and will become yellow and gendered. The gender identity of American eels can depend on a lot of factors. It could depend on density, it could depend on how quickly they're growing, it could depend on other environmental factors. Once they become adults, they've made a final change in appearance and they head out to sea as silver eels. Needless to say, it's been pretty tricky to figure out what the gender is of an eel because it's always changing.
This brings us to our final point. Gender identity is not linked to sexuality. Variation in sexuality is a whole other conversation and not in the scope of this video. I'm a trans, non-binary individual attracted to all genders, but I could be attracted to a single gender, multiple genders, all genders, or people who claim zero gender, or no one for that matter. And my gender identity does not inform my attraction.
Gender identity is not linked to sexuality. I want to use lions for an example. With Lion King out, it's important to talk about lion queens. This is one of the transgender lions of Botswana's Okavango Delta. She was born genetically female, but later in life started to develop male characteristics, so a mane, and also behaviors that were more characteristic of male lions. Territorial defense, roaring a lot more. I call her she just because that's her genetic identity. We don't really know how she feels inside. What we do know is that there's a portion of females in this population that start out looking as females and over time start to look more like and act more like males. They're not rejected by the community and they mate with males. So they're accepted and integrated into the pride and serve a really important function in helping the pride do even better.
The last thing we want to say, and perhaps the most important,
is that whether it's hummingbirds, cardinals, frogs, lizards, or lions,
other animals don't reject the individual characteristics that we think of as defining non-binary or transgender identity.
If we as humans could follow that example,
it would prevent hatred, violence, and suicides.
We think it's about time to return to a place that we've been to before of embracing, valuing, and honoring everyone's gender identity, regardless of what it is.
If you are dealing with anxiety, depression, or suicidal thoughts due to being trans, please contact the Trans Lifeline. Their number is 877-565-8860, or in Canada, 877-330-6366, or you can visit them online at www.translifeline.org. If you would like to help your fellow humans who happen to be trans, contact the National Center for Transgender Equality to be an agent of change in a positive direction, and you can find them at transequality.org.
In honor of all those who have been persecuted and lost their lives fighting for gender identity rights.